today to, this is the second stop in a 20-stop, 4-day tour that I'm going on throughout the state, to emphasize the need for us to take action right now to provide transportation funding, both for our mass transit systems and our bridges, roads, and highways. The administration was able to obtain significant funding, increased funding for transportation in 2007 in what was called Act 44. We produced over $1 billion, not over, just slightly below $1 billion additional transportation funding a year. That was for both mass transit and for our highway needs. That was in response to a commission that I formed in 2005 called the Transportation Reform Commission that recommended that Pennsylvania spend $1.7 billion more annually on transportation funding. We didn't do the 1.7, but we did do almost $1 billion in funding. And that funding came from two sources: increased tolls on the Pennsylvania Turnpike and the toll revenues we would get by tolling I-80, a previously untolled federal road. But meanwhile, while that was all occurring, the Transportation Reform Commission continued to monitor our transportation needs. Again, mass transit, bridges, roads, and highways, and the like. And it found that the cost to bring our transportation system into passable condition, satisfactory condition, had gone from $1.7 billion of additional funding a year to $3.4 billion of additional funding a year. So based on that report, we asked for a special session of the legislature to do hopefully two things. Number one, actually three things. One, to authorize public-private partnerships in Pennsylvania. I'm going to ask them to, at the bare minimum, to find funding to replace the $472 million we lost when we lost the right to toll I-80. But the truth is that if we're going to do something meaningful for Pennsylvania, if we're going to do something meaningful for our children and our children's children, we have to do more than just replace the I-80 funding. We have to fund transportation significantly so that Pennsylvania can have first-class mass transit, first-class bridges, roads, and highways. It's necessary. The time is now. As the Transportation Reform Commission shows, the more you delay, the more the price tag goes up. If we delay for another 5 years, the price tag will be that much higher for our children to pay. The time to do it is now. It's more than mass transit. And some people around the state have tried to pit mass transit versus highways, bridges, and roads. No way. They're both partners. They're both partners in this venture, and they both need significant help. In Delaware County, we have 67 structurally deficient bridges. 18% of the total number of state bridges in the county are structurally deficient. And we have 74 miles of roads that are in poor and sometimes dangerous condition. 13% of our overall roads. Now, across our 5-county region in Philadelphia, we have 2,720 bridges that are structurally deficient, and 17% of our roads are in poor condition. We can't wait. Those bridges won't repair themselves. Those roads won't get better just because we want them to get better. It's our quality of life. It's our public safety. It's our economic competitiveness. And if we come up with the money necessary to repair our mass transit systems and our roads, bridges, and highways, it's the single best producer of jobs. Because not only does it produce jobs on the highways and bridges, on the viaduct, but it produces jobs back in Pennsylvania factories that are making the steel and the concrete and the asphalt and the timber and the paint and all of the things necessary to do mass transit and road and bridge repair. On June 30th, we did a snapshot just for the stimulus money, and Pennsylvania's received $1.2 billion of stimulus money for roads and bridges alone. We did a snapshot. There were 8,600 workers on construction sites funded solely by stimulus money. Then we took all of the vendors to those sites and found that they had rehired or hired anew 3,600 workers to fulfill those stimulus contracts. So a portion of that $1.2 billion had produced over 12,000 good-paying, family-sustaining jobs that can't be outsourced. That are filled by Americans, filled by Pennsylvanians, filled by Philadelphians. It is the single best job creator we have. Now, but you've got to pay for it. And poll after poll has shown that the American people understand the needs of infrastructure. They're willing to pay for it because they can see it, they can touch it, they ride on it. It affects their daily lives in a palpable way. So I don't think it is quite as hard a lift. But let me tell you what I have recommended to the legislature we do. I've recommended we go beyond $472 million and we enact an excess profit tax on our oil companies. Relieve them from paying the CNI because they really don't pay much of it anyway, thanks to the Delaware loophole. But there are other ways to do it. I have said that I would sign anything, any combination of revenue increases that produces at a minimum $472 million. And in my judgment, it ought to be significantly more than that. And let me give you an example of just how easy $472 million would be able to, raising that revenue would be able to do. If you took all of the fees that are charged, license fees, registration fees, most people have no clue what they paid in fee for their registration. If you just indexed it for inflation, let's say the license fee was last raised in 1997. If you indexed it for inflation and just raised it to what inflation would dictate, you raised all of our fees to what inflation would dictate, that would produce $327 million a year. And interestingly, in one of the polls that Building America's Future, that's the infrastructure organization nationwide that I head up with Governor Schwarzenegger and Mayor Bloomberg, we took a poll. 61% of Americans, Republicans and Democrats alike, from every state in the union, 61% believe that the federal gas tax was indexed for inflation and goes up every year. Well, it hasn't been increased since 1993. But that poll shows that people expect the gas tax to go up, at least in line with inflation. But the one option that is not acceptable, it's not acceptable to me, and it shouldn't be, it's not acceptable to any of the folks here, and it shouldn't be acceptable to any citizen of Pennsylvania, and that is the option of doing